First of all, thank you, Robert and the Securosys team for inviting me today to hold this presentation about Securosys HSMs and the SIC system. It's been coming up before. I see a lot of faces around also in the crowd from past collaborations and present collaborations in the SIC system. But maybe some of you have never heard about the SIC system and wonder what it is. And I can tell you it's this kind of system. If you've never heard of it, it's actually a good thing, because it's supposed to do its thing in the background. And usually if you get press, it's not good press if it's in the press. So a few numbers. SIC stands for Swiss Interbank Clearing. And it's nothing less but the most important payment system in Switzerland. It is it's not run, it's run by us, by SIC, but it's mandated and owned more or less by the Swiss National Bank. They have mandated SIC AG to run and build the SIC system, and it's been in operation since 1987. A few key figures. We have processed a total of 968 million transactions last year, and the Swiss franc turnover over the year was 57.2 trillion francs. I think when it comes to German again, it's trillion. In English is billion or billiarden. I'm not sure, I have to check again in German. The peak day, I was listed at the bottom here, the peak day of 2023, we turned over 420 billion Swiss francs in one day, which is pretty much more than half of the country's GDP. We do so very reliably. The availability last year was 99.99%. And yeah, it should sort of illustrate a bit how important the system is. Maybe about a comparison around the world. SIC is the central Swiss franc payment system. We settle money in central bank money, national bank balances. Pretty much every currency around the world has a similar system, and usually these kind of systems are run and operated by the national banks themselves. These systems are called real-time gross settlement systems, or RTGS systems. Quickly to look at how this works. How does an RTGS work? We are in the middle, and the current platform, Robert mentioned it, is the fourth generation of the SIC platform. It's been running since 2016 in production, and settling a transaction or processing a transaction SIC is pretty much a very simple three-step process. On the left-hand side, you have bank. Banks are the parties connected to the SIC system. And banks, of course, have customers, could be a natural person, could be a corporate. And they all want to do payments, being the person, the corporate, or the bank itself. They all have the need to do payments. And they are submitting these payments in the shape of an ISO 20022 message. Fancy term, suffice to say, it's an international payment standard. It's the standard. Switzerland in 2016 introducing it was one of the first countries worldwide to do it. In the meantime, most countries have done this migration. The last ones are now stepping over the line. And these ISO messages are being sent into the RTGS service of the SIC system. There they are being validated and checked if they are semantically and syntactically correct. And if so, that the bank gets an acknowledgement saying, I got your message, and I guarantee you, if you have sufficient funds with the national bank in our system, I'm going to settle your transaction, which is the next thing that happens. The transaction gets settled with finality, meaning the money has been moved, and it's definitely at that point in the ownership of the credited bank. In the third step, the message gets delivered to the credited bank, which then in turn either, well, if it's a bank-to-bank payment, keeps the money for itself, or it credits the customer that the money was intended for, being it a natural person or a corporate. That's pretty much what the SIC system does. That's the 968 million transactions a year. That's the bulk of the business, but of course, the system does much more than that, of course. Liquidity management, business continuity, as you can imagine, is a large part. So we spend pretty much, I would say 70–80% of our time actually with the unhappy path if any of this is not working. The SIC system also is a special system. When you look at other countries in the world, they don't mix these kind of transactions in one system, meaning bank payments and retail payments. Switzerland, for efficiency purposes, has said, okay, let's combine this, and it's an impressive figure when you look at on the right-hand side. The left two columns show the number of transactions in the system. And you can see that the interbank payments, so a bank-to-bank payment, are just 1.8% actually of the transactions in the SIC system. 98% is retail payments, so meaning I send money to Marcel, or he sends me, rather, for whatever reason. Yeah. However, when you look at the turnover in Swiss franc, it's the opposite, right? The interbank payments, they account for 90%, almost 90% of the Swiss franc turnover in the system, whereas the retail payments, well, I send 50 franc, the bank usually sends 50 million franc. That's where the difference is coming from. This is a stretch, right, for a system. On the one hand, you need to be highly secure because you want to make sure that these high-value payments are adequately secured. On the other side, you have to process a lot of payments because retail payments are just a big mass of payments and they need to go through very quickly. So what the requirements was for the security in SIC, of course, it needs to be able to secure these high-value payments, but it needs to be fast enough. And this is pretty much what the following requirements were for the system. I mean, none of this is like surprising, but of course, it's very important. It's important that the system, the messages are being, of course, transmitted in a confidential way. They are integrity checked, authenticated, and also non-repudiation is a very important factor when it comes to financial transactions, meaning if Bank A sends us a message, you can later no longer claim, oh, I never sent this message. We can prove you did send it because you personally signed it with your key that Robert mentioned before, you better store safely. Yes, so in 2016, when the fourth generation of the platform was launched, also a new generation of HSMs was to be launched with the system. And back then, the National Bank mandated that the new HSM has to be a Swiss engineered, Swiss designed, extremely hard and military grade HSM that they want to use in the SIC system. Back then there was a lot of press, it talks about leakage of SWIFT transactions. The NSA had backdoors installed and different kind of security solutions and was able to read or track international transactions, even though they're not meant to go through the states and so on. This is one of the reasons why the national banks, okay, we want to have a Swiss only solution. This is when the S500 HSM of Securosys enters the stage. It was introduced in the SIC system in 2016, and it was since the only HSM allowed to be used in the system. How does security in SIC work? In a nutshell, of course, I mean, in the end, it's not rocket science, but of course you want to use the best practice of everything. On the right-hand side at the top, we have the SIC system. Here we have the bank that's connected to the SIC system. We have approximately around 300 banks. They are not all connecting directly themselves, some of them going through a software partner. The main reason in the middle is you have a closed user group network. We call it the Secure Swiss Finance Network, which is based on the Scion technology. This was developed at ETH. If you want to know more about that, there's people much more capable than me explaining what it is, and also in this room I see people. Suffice to say for this topic, it's a closed user group network, it's non-public. Then what we also do is there's a dedicated SIC Advanced Security Server, short SAS, which SIC is publishing on behalf for the use of within the SIC system itself, but also with the banks. It is developed by Elka for us, and it is the idea of the software is to sort of encapsulate all the security operations in one central software to make sure not all the banks, not SIC, have to do all the software implementations themselves for security, because in the end, security in principle is easy, but getting it right is very difficult. So we want to make sure that we have one central software solution that is doing this right, and everybody uses the same one. It also makes it much more easier to make sure everybody speaks the same language from a security standpoint. The SIC Advanced Security Server, the SAS, does everything pretty much what public key operations concerns. So it has a key administration module, it has an GUI, and so on. And of course, behind it, we have the Securosys S500 HSMs, where all the private keys, of course, are stored and all the private key operations happen. And the banks and the SIC system, they talk through to the HSM actually via an API that the SaaS is offering to the outside world. It's pretty much how the SIC system works today and how it has been working since 2016. And as I said, you may have never heard of the system before for a long time, but a lot has changed since 2016. And one major change actually came this year when also the SIC system stand a bit more into the public light, maybe also indirectly just. But 20th of August 2024 saw the launch of instant payments in Switzerland, as you may have heard, seen, read in any of these media outlets. So it was covered quite broadly across the country in the most important outlets. And the good-looking gentleman here actually is my boss. He's the CEO of SIC Interbank Clearing, Matthias Seiler. Yes, instant payment is live. What is instant payment? Switzerland, when it came to ISO 2022 and so on, we were one of the first movers. Instant payments, we were not one of the first movers. We allowed more for later parties to join the game. The countries around us, namely the EU, they already have instant payments in place for a while already, more struggling with adoption. But what are instant payments? Two key figures. The instant payments is an account-to-account payment that needs to happen in 10 seconds or less, rather less. And it's a payment method that is offered around the clock. Now you could argue we have already something like this in place in Switzerland with Twint, which I agree from an end user perspective, right? You click the button, you see the balance in your account being removed or booked. So it gets you an instant payment feel. But when you look under the hood, actually Twint itself is not instant payment because the interbank settlement happens later. So until that settlement happens, actually the bank go into a counterparty risk situation when it comes to Twint transactions, which also one of the reasons, I guess, explaining the rather lower limits you have when you use Twint. So instant payments, they're not delaying settlement. Instant payments are settled right away with finality. So if you click the button in your banking app, the bank actually sends the money to the receiving bank within those 10 seconds. And the settlement is final, meaning if you want the money back, the other bank also has to send you the money back. Which brings great advantages, especially when it comes to larger payments, corporates and so on, because liquidity management gets much easier. How does an instant payment work? We saw before the easy 3-step process. It gets a bit more complicated. In the end, it's pretty much a different way of the payment to work. It's more based on a network effect, meaning that whoever wants to send the payment, they instruct their bank to do so via e-banking or whatever kind of initiation mechanism they will offer in the future. The bank will submit the payment to the instant payment service of the SIC platform. SIC does not directly settle, but only reserve the funds, checking if the bank has enough funds. If the bank doesn't have enough funds, payment gets rejected. And before it gets settled, it actually forwards the payment request to the receiving bank and says, receiving bank, will you accept this payment? So the receiving bank does have to do some checks. Then does the account actually exist? Is it not locked? Is it not sanctioned? Whatever banks have to do before they can accept the payment. Afterwards, the bank has to send an accept message or deny message. We go with a happy path for this case. And once the accept has been sent to the SIC system settles with finality and sends the confirmation to both sides, whether in the end charge or debit the respective accounts, and send further notifications if they want to. That's the whole flow. That's the flow that needs to happen within 10 seconds or less, I mentioned before. Maybe to also stand out within SIC, with all the network latency, with the security operations that have to happen, and of course the business logic. We gave ourselves a maximum of 200 milliseconds in the SIC system to make sure that the bulk of these 10 seconds actually is available to the banks outside. They also have to do more complicated additional many compliance and sanction checks, which take a lot of time. This is why the SIC system only has a small fragment of these 10 seconds time. So it needs to be quick. A few numbers from the market launch. What what we observe actually now since the market launch in 20th of August, the average processing time is at the moment by 2.2 seconds, which is a small disclaimer, of course, and we cannot really measure centrally end-to-end the whole time because we can only measure to the last notification. When then actually the notification to the outside world happens, we don't exactly know, but it's not much more than that. Transactions a day, it's starting slow, but it's also what we expected. We have 4-digit to 5-digit daily volumes between 5 and 15,000 payments a day. More than 60 banks are able to receive. We come to that later, why that is the case. And what's nice to see is that in the SIC system, including all security operations, we take an average of 15 milliseconds today for the whole processing. And to my point before, the average settlement amount per payment is higher than 1,000 francs. Also, one of the use cases I mentioned before, well, at the moment for the launch, we have a limit of 20,000 francs per payment, but this is not something that's technologically enforced. This is more of a, you want to get used to this same new payment system first, and we want to increase the limits later on. It's not a new idea. We pretty much looked at what the European Union was doing, and they pretty much did the same. So we thought it's a good idea to follow that route. What's next? Where we are on the roadmap when it comes to instant payment, we are here in the middle in August, just beyond August. So why we have 60 banks is very easy. The national bank told them you have to. One of the reasons why the instant payments in the EU picked off very slowly, because I think in the EU we have instant payments since 2017, 18. From the beginning on, it was optional to join for the banks, right? And it's a major investment for the banks to bring their systems up to instant payment capabilities, round-the-clock operations, maintenance without downtime, and so on. Which is why the national bank said, okay, as you saw on the flow before, the slide before, it's very important. The instant payment is sort of a network product, right? Bank A can only send if Bank B is able to receive. That's why the national bank said, okay, we mandate the 50 plus largest banks in Switzerland when it comes to retail payment traffic to be able to receive instant payments so that whoever wants to offer instant payment has a broad network of reachability that they can rely on. Yes, so that's what's happened in August. The other members of the SIC system, which are active in customer payments but did not meet the criteria of being big enough, they will have to be able to receive instant payments by November 2026. So the second wave of onboarding of these banks is starting now for the next 2 years. And then, of course, the big question is how will the instant payment volumes develop over the next years in the SIC system? So yeah, we are excited to observe what's happening. Of course, what's going to be the use cases that they're going to be relying on instant payments to increase efficiency of whatever payments, being e-commerce, point of sale, or whatever it can happen. Yeah, that's going to be interesting development for the next years. That's the outside look, instant payments in the market. That also meant we at SIX, we had to get busy. We had to build a new platform, the 5th generation platform. On the right-hand side, you see the 4th generation platform. Let's call it bird's eye view. It's very abstracted, but in the end, you can say it's a classic database-centered architecture with an application in front. The application runs single instance. It does everything. That's more or less single core. And if it crashes, you have to start it up in a second instance, either same place, different place, and so on. And if you want to maintain or run maintenance on the application, you have to take it down, maintain it, and start it back up. All the things which are not very compatible with instant payments around the clock operation and so on. So we were thinking, okay, can we take the 4th generation platform and extend it? And we said, yeah, we could, but that would be really, then we have to optimize so much that we are pretty much at the end of the capabilities of the platform. And if we, in 5 years' time, have to increase, I don't know, volumes again or decrease latencies, we would be at the end of our potential. That was the main reason why we said, okay, if we do it right, let's do it fresh. And the instant payment service was developed on a new platform, this SIC 5 platform. I think all the numbers already were on the previous slide, but the main maybe is that we are scaling up to 35 million payments a day. That's the goal, to be future-proof. Even if we, let's say, if it ever comes to the case that we settle card transactions on a single transaction basis, it would be pretty much what Switzerland today has as daily transaction volumes. And the system has to be able to process 2,000 payments per second for the duration of 1 hour. So the Christmas Eve shopping spree. Yeah. Yep. So what's the new platform like? It's lots of fancy words. It's a container platform. It's cluster-based, meaning we have pretty much separated the architecture in a way that, okay, on the right-hand side, you have everything that is state. It's a processing cluster. And the main challenge is if you run in a distributed platform, you have one truth, which is the account balance. It's about money, it's about central bank money, and it must always be right. And if you have a distributed system, you always run the challenge of, okay, who's right? Do we have the true state in the system? And does the majority of our cluster agree on that? Right? So in the end, it's a classic computer science problem. So this is solved in our processing cluster, which is based on Aaron cluster, which is open source, low-level Java library. And actually, you can also get support for that by Adaptive. This is the consulting company for it. It's also mainly used today in high-frequency trading systems. So it's definitely fast enough for our terms because we are not high-frequency trading. We're not talking nanoseconds. We're talking milliseconds. So for us, that's good. And in front, we have a processing gateway, which is the stateless part, which you can just scale more, just add more. And yeah, this does pretty much the communication to the outside world, to the banks. It does the processing of the payments as far as it's possible to do that stateless, but most of the payment transaction processing, like analyzing the message, seeing if it's secure, talking to the security infrastructure, of course, you do that in the stateless part. Yes. And in the middle, we have no longer a database. We have something called an event log. So it's pretty much the idea that any event that enters the system, that mutates the system, being it a payment being submitted, settled, rejected, whatever. It's an event that gets added to the event log. And the idea is if you read the event log step by step, you can always reproduce the entire state of the system just by reading the event log, which is very neat when it comes to multiple nodes. A node crashes, you take it down for maintenance, you start it back up. All it needs to do is read the event log. It's based back up to speed, and it can join the cluster again and do the processing. It's distributed over 2 data centers. Maybe also what's interesting is that we have no majority in one data center. You could argue, okay, if you have no majority in one data center of your cluster nodes, then if one of them goes down, the system stops. That's true. It's one of the discussions at the moment we have. Do we need a third data center? Because the only way to be absolutely sure that you can cope with data center loss is you have to have 3. You're saying that instant payment is not there yet at the criticality, and data centers don't let's call it fail that often. So at the moment we live with the risk. And the reason why we have no majority in one data center is that we want to make sure that the state of the system is always distributed at least across both data centers. If you have the majority in one data center, in theory, the whole state, the majority of the votes could be just in one data center. That's the reason why we don't have a majority. Yes, but in the end, also this, I guess it's not rocket science, but you have to do it right. Yes, so we built a new system. You have instant payments live. Other things also changed since 2016. Instant payments at the bottom here because we talked about it, but a lot of other things have changed. The S500 has been in operation now for 8 years in this SIC system, meaning let's call it ecosystem, right? With SIC, all the banks, all the service providers that run the security platform have to have those S500 HSMs. It's more than 200 out in the market. I think, Marcel, only one of them actually failed beyond repair. The other ones are either, I think a handful have to be repaired, but they are very, very remarkably stable. So thanks for that. That's been a very calm 8 years when it comes to security in the system. But other things have developed. The number of transactions has gone up tremendously. In 2016, we had less than 500 million transactions in the system. Now we are close to 1 billion per year, and we are confident that actually this billion will be stepping over the billion this year, 2024. What's actually more critical to the system itself is not the annual number of transactions, because for us it's much more critical. We have to be making sure that we finish settlement and processing of transactions every single day. Day end processing is at 6:15, and we have to make sure that all transactions are settled in time, which is why for us, from an IT standpoint, the daily peak is much more interesting than the annual transactions. And the highest day we ever had so far is 12.39 million transactions in one day. Comparing to 2016, when the system went live, the actual peak day was 5.6 million. Just as a side mark, when the fourth generation went live of the system in 2016, we said it has to handle 10 million transactions a day maximum. So we were sort of underestimating the development of payments in Switzerland. By the way, we increased this. So we are coping well with these kind of numbers at the moment. Yes, of course, also hardware has evolved. Brute force attacks become more powerful. More calculating capacities out there. So we require longer cryptographic keys, which of course also for any kind of security operations means break-off performance or like less performance. And of course there's this looming quantum computer out there that may be coming, may not be coming. But if it is coming, it's going to be a big disruption for our field. So these kind of topics have developed drastically over the last 8 years. So for us, that meant not just renewing the SIC infrastructure itself, but also getting to a new HSM generation. We already saw the pictures before in Robert's presentation. The National Bank was very happy with that choice in 2016, or 2014 actually, saying, okay, we want Securosys to build the HSMs. They said, we would like to continue that. And it is. We have again a SIC-only HSM. Actually, we have 3. Because one of the points was you have larger banks, medium banks, smaller banks, and the S500 was a very high performance HSM, where smaller banks said, yeah, it's cool, but actually I don't need it. I have like 20 transactions a day. So we also have different performance classes now. Of course, it needs to be PQC ready. It needs to be ready for longer encryption keys. And what's very important for the SIC system, as I mentioned at the beginning, we don't want to be in the press, we want stability. Securosys will provide these systems for the next 10 years, the HSMs. So we have also a sort of a planning security for our system for the next decade. Plus, when it comes to moving to the new HSMs, we also have backward compatibility, meaning you can run them in a cluster with your old HSMs if they support that. And yeah, you can also now remote administer it with Decanus, the product by Securosys, because in the past it was always meant, the SMB said, we want to make sure that you step in front of your HSM on a regular basis, so we do not allow remote administration. So, but we also know that a lot of, or some of our customers, they run data centers in very remote or distant location from each other. So it's also a big hassle if you have to go to each and every site every single time, which is why it's now allowed to use this remote administration as long as you handle the device itself like you would an HSM, meaning you cannot leave it on your desk. That was the caveat the SMB said. I mean, it's a bit more strict than that, but you get the idea. Yes, so this is what it looks like. The S2 series looks like a Primus X. Yeah, so we have now 3 performance models available. They check all the boxes on the previous slide. All the participating banks of the SIC system have to replace their current HSM boxes by mid of 2026, so about 2 years' time. And as mentioned, the idea is that we have like a smooth transition from the old HSM world to the new HSM world without any interruptions and so on. So that's where we are. What's next? Of course, the big challenge coming ahead is stay up to date in security. I mentioned it before, quantum computing is the big threat. We just finished a PQC analysis of our system, seeing, okay, where do we, what's our crypto inventory like? How agile are we when it comes to adjusting to post-quantum computing? And the report just came in, we're processing the results, and you may not be surprised, we are also not surprised that we are, of course, vulnerable, like probably everybody else is in the financial industry, when it comes to quantum computing. And yeah, when it came to the fact that powerful enough quantum computer came to be. The main attack vectors or like attack scenarios we see, at least at the moment, the primary one for the SIC system is the so-called harvest now, decrypt later. So if you get your hands on SIC transactions, even if you cannot read them at the moment, it may be worth storing them away and see in 20 years or 10 years or whatever the Q day is, if you can actually break the encryption with your then quantum computer. And the question is, of course, how do you measure relevance of financial transactions? You can argue you have to archive them for 10 years, and it's 10 years, but I would also say, I mean, some transactions may be relevant forever. You then never want them to be decrypted. Yes. And as you can imagine, we at SIC, we have a mindset that's rather risk-averse than risk-taking. We're not great risk-takers, that's not our business. So we will take on this challenge sooner rather than later. We're coming up with a roadmap at the moment. Okay, what's the next step going to be? We're going to talk to our community and our providers and see what the first step should be. Of course, now with the new HSMs, we are PQC ready. The HSMs are there. NIST has also published FIPS 203, 204, 205, mid of August. So standards are also getting there. Of course, we're not there yet that MTLS is clear how it works and so on, but we expect those steps to come soon and next. And yeah, even if the quantum computer never comes, you never know. If it comes, we should be ready. So, conclusion, with instant payment, the SIC system is now entering a new and exciting era for the financial industry, also for us, because SIC is now a bit more in the public view, maybe. And if you ever want to do an instant payment, I hope you do, and you have a good user experience, but just in case you don't have, it may be your bank, it may also be the SIC system, which hopefully not, but yeah, you never know. And with the new SIC 5 platform, we are confident that we build a platform that we can scale for the next quite a few years. With Securosys H2 series HSMs, we are also in good shape to take on the coming challenges, because if we have to process more transactions, process them faster. If you say, I want instant payment, I don't know, at the point of sale, but 10 seconds is way too slow, I agree. We have to be quicker. And of course, we have to get ready for post-quantum. We are also ready for that. We have to do it. And saying that and concluding, thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the questions. And of course, to the end, looking back 10 years with Securosys HSMs in the system, they have been very, very quiet years. That's a good thing when it comes to the security. It has been running very smoothly. I'm looking forward to 10 more years of Securosys HSMs in the system. And yeah, let's see then after that. Thank you.